Hi! In today's video I want to talk to you guys about some of my favorite historical periods to read about in books. And this video is also sponsored by Hotkey Books for These Shallow Graves by Jennifer Donnelly, but more about that later. So on my bed right now there's a really long row of books that I've tried to order chronologically based on what time they are set in. I'm not going to tell you where it starts and ends, you will figure that out yourself, but I've tried to find some examples of some of my favorite historical settings. I don't know if these will be a surprise to you or not, and I'm also very curious to hear what you guys like to read about. Because when I asked some of my friends, they all sort of said, oh, like Second World War time, or maybe the 60s or the 70s, and my answers are slightly different. So first of all, we've got one of my loves, the Middle Ages. I freaking love the Middle Ages, but I haven't actually read that many books set in the Middle Ages. Now, when I say Middle Ages, it's not that I love fantasy stuff that has a sort of medieval setting. I actually like people living in the Middle Ages, if that makes sense. Not entirely sure what it is that I like so much about it. I'm like, yeah, I want that feudal system. I think it's something that has appealed to me since I was a kid, and I wish that was more medieval YA. Here are two examples. So there is The Letter for the King, but what I have here is the sequel, which is The Secrets of the Wildwood by Tonke Dragt. This is originally translated from Dutch. This is pretty straightforward, like set in the Middle Ages fiction. And then there is also this, which is one of my favorite books probably ever. This is also a Dutch one, it's not very helpful, but this one has been translated so you can actually read it. This is Crusade in Jeans, which is actually cheating a little bit, I guess, because it's about a boy from the 80s, it was written in the 80s, who gets sent back to the Middle Ages and gets stuck there. This is probably the book that really got me into medieval settings when I was young. I think part of the idea is that you can imagine yourself there and like think about how you would fare in that world, both with like the knowledge you have now and the skill set that people required. Now we're gonna move on to a period that is like quite related to the Netherlands because it's the golden age in the Netherlands. Part of the reason that I'm obsessed with this is that I'm from the Netherlands. The town that I went to university had like a really rich history in that period. I don't even know when the exact golden age is. Is it like the 17th century, I guess? I'm really gonna show my ignorance in this video. There's two books that I want to talk about. The first one is another Dutch one. It is set in 1712 and it is about an orphan in Amsterdam. Look how cute this is. I haven't read this since I was like 12 probably, but I feel like this cover helps to sort of show you what we're talking about. And then of course there is the very popular The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton, which is actually set in 1686. This is a weird colonial period for the Netherlands. It is also, I think, around the time of the tulip fever. Maybe that was slightly later. I know there's a couple of books about tulips that I want to read, not like non-fiction books about tulips. It's like the canals and the really beautifully decorated houses. That's the general vibe of that, so I really like that as well. Haven't read enough of that, I have to say. Then sort of moving on to the Regency era, so I've got Sense and Sensibility as an example here. I love Regency stuff. I don't think I've ever like properly looked up when the Regency era was, and I've just opened up Sense and Sensibility and it says first published in 1811. I like the British setting and the mix between the countryside and the city and, you know, all the things that people love about Austen, which I guess was part of the time, the like manners and the not being able to talk to each other if you hadn't been introduced, women who couldn't own any of their own properties, you know, all those things. Then we're moving on to some more Victorian stuff. I actually haven't read a lot of Victorian books that are set in cities. Those are actually some of my favorite films to watch, but I realized I haven't read a lot of books that do that. We've got Jane Eyre, we've got Wuthering Heights. So Wuthering Heights was first published in 1847 and Jane Eyre was first published in 1847. It's hard to say what I like about this period because you don't get that much context when it comes to these books because it's all set in like the countryside, but there's still the big thing of like people who come from money and who don't really have a job, and then there's the people that really have to work hard and don't really get anything for it in return, and it's the whole governess thing. I realize that all the ones that I've talked about have been quite European centric. We're gonna go a little bit more to the US now. So this is New York 1890s and this is These Shallow Graves. I read this last year when I was working at Hotkey Books, and this is a new paperback cover, which I do like a lot more than the hardback. What I like about this is that it still has that mix of, again, the rich and the poor side almost reads like a sort of Dickensian London with like pickpockets and stuff like that, and the rich side is like the beautiful dresses, the girls who don't really get a say in their own future, who can't be alone with men in the same room. It plays a really big role in this book. So Jo Montfort, who comes from a really rich family, really wants to be a reporter, but that is just not like a feasible goal for a girl, except that there is this female journalist at the time who is like her biggest hero. Also, this talks about something that kind of comes back across different periods of time, which is like insane asylums, especially for women, which I guess that any period that won't let women sort of do what they want to do and considers them hysterical if they do have a voice sort of has in common. In case you haven't heard about this, by the way, the story is that Jo's father is found dead. People think it's suicide. Jo is convinced it is not, and then she meets this young reporter who is, if I can say so myself, quite swoony, and she convinces him to let her tag along while they try and like discover these secrets, going from graveyards to morgues to the unsavory parts of the city. So that is sort of New York city life in the 1890s. Okay, we're getting closer to the end now. Some more US stuff. I really like Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. I wouldn't say it's like American frontier stuff. I guess it's set quite a bit later. Was it like 1937? But it really reminds you of that like American frontier sort of era. I guess all of Steinbeck is sort of similar in that way. I haven't read any other Steinbeck besides this. As a weird version of this, there is the Chrysalids by John Wyndham, which is almost set in like a town in early America, and everything centers around the church, and it's like a couple of houses on a dirt road. But this is actually set in a future after like a nuclear thing has happened, and they have kind of reverted back to that. That was also very good. Again, it's hard to explain what the appeal of that is. I think I just quite enjoy reading about like sort of oppressive societies with all these rules set in place, and then there's like one character that's trying to break free from that. Then we're gonna go to the Edwardian period. I have a bit of an interesting relationship with the Edwardian period because I did a master's course that literally like we covered one book from each year. I think, is it like 1901 to 1911, I want to say? And it definitely has sort of like, it is the 1900s and everything is new. My example for this one is The First Men in the Moon by H.G. Wells, and this really encapsulates the thing that I like about it, is where like people were doing science and they sort of knew what was going on, but the moon was still so far away and it was such a mystery. And this is like some really lovely sci-fi sort of story of these two guys that like sort of by accident invent this thing that can take them to the moon. It feels super British. It's a bit like Downton Abbey era in the beginning, maybe around the Titanic, that kind of stuff. Changes were brewing, but not everyone was ready for it yet. And then finally I'm gonna sort of have like my wild card, and it is The Big Lie by Julie Mayhew, because this is an alternate version of the future. This is set in England under German reign, so this is a what would happen if Germany had won the Second World War, but it almost sort of reads like it is set in North Korea. I don't really enjoy Second World War novels that much, I know they're really popular, but this in a sort of workaround way is how I do actually enjoy it. Those were some of my favorite eras. For some of them I can't quite explain what it is that I like about them, but I do think they have a sort of common thread. I'll put links to all of these in the description. Thanks so much for Hotkey for working with me on this video, and go check out These Shallow Graves. Let me know in the comments which eras you like reading about most. I'll be in the comments to chat with you guys. And if there's anything from this video that you'd like me to talk more about, just let me know. I just realized I totally forgot to tell you guys that I'm gonna be at VidCon. Yay, last minute decisions. So hopefully I'll see you guys there. Alright, I'll talk to you guys later. Doei!